Welcome to Data and Biotech, a podcast from Cordi where we explore how companies leverage data to drive innovation in life sciences. Every 2 weeks, we sit down with an expert from the world of biotechnology to understand how they're using data science to solve technical challenges, streamline operations, and further innovation in their business. Here we go.
Aliza Apple, welcome to the Data and Biotech podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, just to kick us off, would you mind introducing us to you and your background and what brings you here today?
Sure. So Aliza Apple, I'm the VP of Catalyze360 AI, and I'm now allowed to share that I'm also the global head of TuneLab, which is a new offering that we've just launched. I'm a scientist by training. I trained as a biomedical engineer at UCSF and UC Berkeley, a postdoc at Cornell Medical College, spent about a decade at McKinsey, and a couple stints in biotech before joining Lilly.
Awesome. Well, I know we're here to talk about TuneLab today, but before we get into TuneLab, would you just talk about, in the context of Lilly as an organization, what Catalyze360 is and what it encompasses?
Yeah, sure. Very happy to share that. So, Lilly Catalyze360 is rooted in the goal of finding the most exciting science wherever it lives. And we then focus on supporting the associated biotechs by essentially meeting them where they are. So, we've got four major offerings that we call pillars. The first is Lilly Ventures, where we make investments that are really focused on novel areas of science at their earliest stages. The second is Lilly Gateway Labs, which is our innovation hubs, where we offer state of the art lab facilities and scientific engagement with the companies themselves. And the third is Lilly Explore R&D, where we offer R&D services all the way from discovery through clinical proof of concept. And the fourth is our newly baptized Lilly TuneLab, which is our collaborative AI/ML platform for drug discovery. So really focusing on providing a 360 suite of offerings. That's where the 360 comes from. We get that question a lot. It's not 360 companies, it's 360 degrees.
Right. And so I should think of Catalyze360 as sort of like external innovation, how Lilly participates in the external biotech environment in order to foster innovation so that the organization can stay abreast of where all of the different innovation applications of biotech are coming from. Am I thinking about that right?
That's exactly right. Many of our peers call a comparable organization their external innovation team.
Awesome. So we're here to talk about TuneLab, which you just launched. Will you give us an overview of TuneLab and what it offers?
So TuneLab is really a first of its kind collaborative AI drug discovery platform with a pretty unique give-get value proposition. So we give biotech companies access to powerful Lilly-trained proprietary models to accelerate their own therapeutic programs. And these are the same models that Lilly scientists use every day that have been trained on decades worth of our own historical data. And in terms of what we get, so in return for access, our participants contribute training data via federated learning, which I'm happy to share more about. But essentially, this flywheel fuels continuous model improvement while maintaining full data privacy and security for all participants. And to be very clear, that is all that we get. So companies retain full control of their proprietary information, ownership of their IP. It's really just a secure way of mutually benefiting the models and driving science forward together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also, I've never heard of anything like this before. So, as I understand it, Lilly is putting up its data that's accumulated over the course of the decades that it's been collecting that data and the models that have been trained on that data. But then offering the opportunity for these external companies to utilize those models for their own purposes, but what they pay in order to participate in that is sort of their own internal data that gets incorporated into the overall system using federated learning. Am I thinking about that right?
That's exactly right. So if you think about this in sort of a longitudinal temporal fashion, where you would typically think about a workflow like this is you would get a hit. So take yourself all the way into preclinical drug discovery. um, and once you've identified a target and started generating hits, These models really focus on essentially the phase from hit to lead to optimization, really all the way to development candidate nomination. And this is an arena where you would, in the kind of old world, pre modeling, so think back maybe even 15 years, you would have to essentially synthesize all of the molecules, test all of them in the wet lab, then look at all of those results, decide what you're going to move forward. And here, what we're talking about is making models available that companies can use at this much higher point upstream in their program development to think about what a molecule would, the way a molecule would likely perform before they synthesize it, before they, but well, synthesize is really the first step, but certainly before they would do any wet lab work. And so, really, this is a way of making the scientific discovery paradigm faster and cheaper. Pharma has been working this way for many, many years. We've had models that look like this as far back as 10 years. Of course, they've improved dramatically over that time frame. But most biotechs just lack the historical data, particularly in these phases of development, to train their own models. And what we're really offering then is on day one, access to models that are extremely high performing, that have cost us over $1 billion to generate. I kid you not, it's with a B. And the idea is that as we collectively contribute to the model's improvements, both in performance and generalizability, everyone wins.
Awesome. Can you give us an idea of what models are being exposed and the different purposes to which they're being applied, and then maybe a little bit about, sort of the data sets that feed those models, and like the type of data that external biotech organizations are expected to bring to the table in order to utilize the models?
Absolutely. So at launch, we're focused on two major use cases, very much in that sweet spot of post hit, and really anywhere sort of in between of that frame to the development candidate nomination. So we're focused on two major arenas. The first is small molecule ADMET, and the second is antibody developability. So two distinct modalities, two suites of models focused on each of those. On the small molecule ADMET side, we're actually making our full suite of in vitro proprietary property predictive models available. So across absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion, and toxicity. These models have over 500,000 unique molecules in the training set, to answer your question on that front, really collected over several decades. And I'm also excited to share with you that we'll be making in vivo predictive models available. They're actively being built in a collaboration that we've announced in parallel to our launch with a company named In Citro, which is led by the prolific CEO and founder Daphne Kohler. And those in vivo models will predict species specific in vivo PK endpoints and 4-day rodent safety endpoints, and some additional in vitro safety pharmacology endpoints, but really expanding that suite and frankly, building these models for the first time and making them available to Lilly and to TuneLab participants at the same time. So we're very excited about that. The second major use case on the antibody developability front, we're focused on, six of the sort of famous, horsemen of the apocalypse, so to speak, for antibody programs. So aggregation risk, thermostability, non-specific binding, solubility, chemical liability, and deamidation, which essentially assesses the likelihood of a spontaneous chemical change in an antibody, which can affect its potency and stability and so on, as well as viscosity. And we're looking to make a fast follow to add models to both of those suites as we go.
Awesome. So you've got these two sort of classes of models that you're making available, and these are sort of the two main use cases that TuneLab is focusing on in the immediate term. So, are there particular external innovation partners or companies that you think that are doing work out in the biotech ecosystem that you think will benefit particularly from these? Companies that are at a particular phase of discovery or development, or companies that are operating in certain therapeutic categories, or how would you classify sort of the segments of the ecosystem that would be most interested in the models you're exposing?
Truly, it is designed to be of use to any company working on preclinical programs. And it really is much more of a modality focused criteria, if you will. So, small molecule and antibody as a starting point. We do have the ambition, as we expand both the small molecule offering and the antibody offering, to add additional modalities. But outside of the modality focus, and the preclinical stage more broadly, these models are completely therapeutic area agnostic. And generally speaking, we have been focused on bringing on board our early stage biotech partners. I can tell you a little bit more about who's already working with us. But in general, we would welcome participation from any company who is aligned philosophically with the give get model and could make use of these models in their own preclinical programs.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would love it if you would share some of the companies that are already working with you. That would be great. And then some information about sort of what they needed to bring to the table in order to participate, and what that process of like joining up and integrating looks like.
So ahead of the public launch, spoiler alert, we did create an early access program in stealth mode, and I'm happy to share that we've had over a dozen companies already join us and participate. The ones that we're particularly grateful to include Firefly Bio, Superluminal, Sizonk, and Interdict. They have all been really helpful in these formative stages, giving us feedback, helping us understand the user experience. With Superluminal, even conducting some of our very first federated learning with participant data. So we've had a really active participation from some of these early companies that we know well and we're very grateful to. And we anticipate a large ramp up over the first year. So the idea here is to go from double digit users to triple digit users as quickly as the industry is excited to get on board.
What were some of the user experience challenges that your early partners faced that you had to sort of resolve as you were developing this federated learning platform for them?
Well, I think naturally with any SaaS platform, getting user feedback and making sure that everything is intuitive, well explained, frankly, also even collecting what those frequently asked questions were. You won't really, you can guess, but you're going to get it wrong. So all of that has been tremendously helpful. I think, one area where I've been really pleasantly surprised is in the reception of the concept of federated learning. While there's certainly an important quick educational piece that we fully anticipated, I do think we expected to, have just more skepticism around the concept than what we've actually experienced. So it's very encouraging. I think the good news is most of the folks that we're working with are data-driven scientific folks who need, of course, to kick the tires, but once they understand the concept and are able to validate it for themselves, are able to get over what I think is probably the biggest mental hurdle historically to something like this actually coming to life, around the contribution and really ensuring that it does in fact protect their IP. They can in fact, move forward with their programs with full confidence that their data is secure. And that's been incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just for our audience's sake, I'd love to I'd love to, define what I understand to be federated learning, and maybe you can paint in the picture in terms of the platform that you've developed. But from my understanding of federated learning, the idea is that all of these different companies who have sort of personally identifiable data, protected health information from these different patients can combine their data assets together, but inside of the architecture of the training system and the models themselves, that the model can learn what it's trying to learn in terms of small molecule ADMET or antibody developability, without the model being able to reveal um any of the individual health information or any of the proprietary IP or data that's being fed into it from the different organizations. So that's sort of my understanding of what's going on. Does that characterize what's going on, and where would you paint in the picture for me?
So I guess one important or at least I think entertaining tidbit is that federated learning is not new. And it is actually used very extensively across a number of different industries, whether it's fintech or retail. federated learning was actually developed by Google in 2016. So we're almost 10 years out from this being widely used and publicized. And I think very simply put, I like to think of it as we don't move data to the model, we move the model to the data. So just as you were saying, the global model essentially is replicated, distributed to each node, and then each node trains the local model on its own data. In our infrastructure, only the delta of the model weights is actually shared back with a centralized server. Sorry, that's aggregated and then used to update the global model. All of these stages in our implementation are actually also encrypted, including using confidential compute. And really, there's a very high focus here on data privacy and security to ensure that, at no stage is any of the data commingled, exposed in any way. And, to be very candid with you, we are doing this with our own data. As you would probably expect, Lilly has very high information security bars. So we have done extensive, very rigorous cybersecurity testing to ensure that we could put our data on this platform as well. So this is not a trust us. This is a we are walking the walk. We are putting our own data on the platform as well. I'd be remiss not to mention that we are actually, on top of all of this, working with a trusted third party. It's called Rhino Federated Computing, which is a third party SaaS company. So, in addition to all of the true infrastructure elements that I've just described, this is not run by Lilly. We have actually selected very purposefully a third party here, which again is a SaaS company. They don't have any of their own therapeutic programs. They never will. And they've built their platform on top of NVIDIA's NVFlare framework, which is the industry standard. We also, in particular, selected Rhino because they have worked with an extensive network of hospitals to conduct federated learning on clinical data. So, in addition to all of the information security standards that we, met our bar, they also have an additional layer of HIPAA compliance standards, which we're not using for TuneLab, at least not yet today. But they have actually met an even higher bar than what we've asked them to jump over.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it makes sense that, from the perspective of the external partners, the fact that Lilly is putting up this, vast quantity of data that was very expensive to produce, and that you've, selected a third party that meets your internal security standards, that you're putting a stake in the ground, that all of this architecture is, of the highest possible quality, so much so that even an organization like Lilly is willing to participate in the sharing. Were there any really hard questions that you got from external partners about Rhino federated computing, or about the federated learning framework that required a lot of research or providing a lot of information? I'm just interested in how those conversations go about the sharing of data back into a system like this.
Yeah, some of it is just understanding the architecture, and of course, that's something we're always happy to walk through. But also, we put our participants in direct contact with Rhino, and they actually, have a contractual agreement with Rhino for their data security. So again, just to highlight that. We've been very deliberate about this not being a server that Lilly hosts. This is really one that is again deliberately hosted by a third party. Most of the questions that we get that are more of a technical nature focus on, I would say, probably two major things. One is around, how do we know that the model's getting better? Quite simply put, right? Because one of the key performance indicators is typically to rerun the test set. And while we have some very, very advanced machine learning scientists on our team that have come up with lots of different ways that we could do this. But what we found to actually be our ultimately simple but elegant answer is to just actively measure the performance of the model before and after training, and to commit to only making the best performing model available as the global model. So, should a training result in a decrease in performance, that is quite simply not the global model that we will serve. I think one of the key performance indicators that we're most excited about in terms of thinking about how the model is getting better is the improvement over the chemical space. So, very candidly, our scientists, especially in the two use cases that we've started with, our scientists are generally really happy with the performance of a lot of our models. There isn't a lot of improvement in accuracy that we expect to get out of the TuneLab um, community. Where we're most excited, however, is really in thinking about the generalizability of the model, because of course the model performs best in chemical space that it's seen. And so the opportunity from our vantage point, which we think is really genuinely exciting, is to make the models more generalizable to chemical space that hasn't been contemplated in our historical data. And again, this is where everyone will benefit from the collective broadening. So that's really the key from our vantage point. So again, less in accuracy and more in generalizability. I think the second piece, which we are still very actively working on, is finding more simple and elegant ways of being able to quantify the uncertainty of the underlying, essentially model predictions. As you can imagine, our partners are very interested in how much they can rely on that data for decision making, especially if this is going to be as far upstream as what do I synthesize. And so we're actively exploring ways to apply techniques called conformal learning, which would essentially help measure the confidence. This is a little bit trickier to do in a federated learning context. So it is something that we're actively experimenting with, but something that we hope to roll out soon.
Awesome, and those questions make a lot of sense. And it brings up sort of another question about if external third parties are sort of building on the high quality data set that you all have developed internally. How do you determine or curate or evaluate the quality of the data that's being brought to you in return for participating in the model? Because I could imagine that there might be certain data sets that it doesn't matter how many different model runs you try. The addition of a certain data set is not going to lead to improvements in the quality of that model.
We employ a number of different strategies, whether it's also thinking about data harmonization aspects. So thinking about, how is the data generated, which protocol, and really better understanding differences that may arise from those pieces. But again, we have to come back to what does the test set tell us before and after. It's really the most simple ultimate North Star of how is the model performing. And really it's the primary metric that we use.
So early on in the conversation, is there like a way of determining whether the data that's being brought is likely of value to the model? Or, if you're a biotech with a data set that's already in existence, how do you sort of determine whether the data that you've developed is sort of worthy of being incorporated into the modeling environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in our early days, so at launch right now, we are being a bit more relaxed about essentially experimenting and better understanding how much data harmonization is really essentially how much we can tolerate and still see gains in model performance. Where we envision quickly advancing together with some additional partners is creating a data generation, easy button, so to speak. So we do actively share our protocols with our participants should they choose to generate their own data, and they can use those protocols for that data generation effort. But we can also start to bring on board CRO partners, and again, there's advantages in thinking about how we can all essentially select the same catalog number to generate the same data using the same assay. And so those are actively pieces that we're building as we go. Our test set, while we can continue to evolve it and sort of test it with historical versions of the model, it will be hard to capture within the test set the breadth of the expanding chemical space. And in particular, as is true to the model, we actually don't know the chemical space that is being added on. Certainly, we don't know it in any way that we could incorporate it into a test set. A company might tell us they're a macrocycle company, but that doesn't really help us think about how to change the test set. So we do encourage participants that have significant data sets to contribute to hold out, the kind of traditional 10 to 20% to create their own test set. And we also do offer fine tuning for those companies to be able to take the global model, tune it, and then apply it into their specific chemical space. So, across a number of those different arenas, should they have enough data to hold out a test set, we also encourage them to just simply share the accuracy kinds of results with us. This is something that, again, I think we'll learn more over time. Also, it will be heavily informed by whether we get very early stage small biotechs, and how often they're actually able to contribute a meaningful amount of data while still holding out a test set.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it also brought up another question for me. So like these, you're creating in essence, sort of foundation models that can then be that can be then be fine tuned, and so and the models that you're developing, every model is sort of a simplification of the world. It's based on domain knowledge and on like your understanding of the space. So I'm curious, how much information do you provide about like the architecture of the models that you're creating, the different assumptions that are in it, the way that you think about the chemical space that you're operating in, that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. We share actually very detailed model catalogs with all of our participants so they can understand the model architecture, specifically understand the breadth of the training set, the current, most up to date global models performance. So all of those parameters we share very openly, as well as I mentioned, the protocols that were used to generate the data.
Awesome. So you mentioned earlier that there are these in vivo predictive models, and that this is something really unique that you're doing here. So I'm interested in your perspective on what makes building these sorts of in vivo predictive models difficult, and what makes this offering different than what else is out there in the open source ecosystem or in the proprietary ecosystem as well.
This is very cutting edge even for us, so it's really exciting territory, and frankly couldn't have found a better partner than the in vitro team, which is both have deep expertise in machine learning, but also a lot of creativity and a lot of biotech scrappiness in how they're approaching it. So it's been a really exciting collaboration to kick off. Maybe to answer your question with a little bit more of a 10,000 foot, imagine a world where you can input a smile string and actually accurately predict what that molecule might do in an animal. That would be truly game changing, both in just overall speed, but also in a meaningful reduction in the use of animals in our scientific development. And we are really excited about that vision and achieving that goal. And as we all know, that's also been something that's been very put out in the public domain as a macro goal for our industry. So, the biggest challenges in getting there truly are in just having enough training data. It's frankly, unfortunately, that simple and that hard, especially if you start to think about larger species of animals. So, some of the models that we'll be building here will be incorporating larger species as well, and really thinking very creatively and very thoughtfully about how we can essentially train a model across the breadth of the in vitro data sets that we have, across the various species of in vivo data sets that we have, to create as accurate of a model as we possibly can out of the gate. And using a forum like TuneLab for other companies to contribute that data, we firmly believe is going to be the fastest way to get there. And we're very excited to actually get the train on the tracks and see what it can do.
It strikes me that this is sort of like an inversion of the way that the marketplace works right now, where part of the story of a biotech organization coming into its own right now is sort of like building up that data set so that you have sort of the proprietary lens on whatever the modality or therapeutic area that you're operating in is. How do you think TuneLab has the potential to change the way that the biotech ecosystem works, or that early stage biotech organizations sort of grow and evolve?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was really at the core of which use cases we actually thought about tackling, especially what do we want to tackle first? And I work with a brilliant woman named Nisha Nanda who heads up all of Catalyze360, and essentially, you know, she'd been mulling over this twofold question around like we see within Lilly Ventures and Explore R&D and Lilly Gateway Labs, we see so many companies that have incredible differentiation in certain areas of their discovery program, but so few have really thought about then actually developing a molecule. And this is just naturally not where these size companies would have built up a data set, and there are tried and true methods, and there are big players like Lilly who actually have the historical data. So there was this interesting paradigm shift, I think, in her thinking around how can we both accelerate these companies, but also use the collective and frankly use Lilly as an underpinning and as a convener to realize this promise of what all of this data, if actually leveraged together, what it could do. And I can tell you a funny story about how this whole thing got started, but essentially that was really at the crux of it, is what is a classic biotech's true, right to win from a differentiation perspective. And I think we can all agree that ADME is probably not it. And so really thinking about how we can make those tools available, and create this give get model, really kind of stemmed from that around they're going to have really exciting novel biology insights or very interesting specific chemistry insights, but unlikely that they're going to have toxicity insights.
Yeah, for sure. And if there's time, I would love to hear the whole story underlying that. But the other question that came to mind for me as you were talking about is what are the biggest benefits to Lilly as an organization from creating TuneLab and sort of exposing this federated learning model, built on top of your data, to the ecosystem at large?
Yeah, I mean, really simply, it really comes back to our mission as a whole for Catalyze 360, which essentially is making sure that the best science is sees the light of day and has a fighting chance to make the impact that it could have. And so, from our vantage point, we certainly think that the give get model, we're excited about what we can get in terms of, again, the generalizability of the models, but we're equally excited to give because truly, I think seeing the biotech industry, which, let's be honest, it has been a difficult time, and really being able to give back and do our part in ensuring that companies can realize some of these efficiencies and, come through this difficult time with the promise of AI in its tailwinds, I think would be a noble goal that we'd be really excited to have played a small part in.
There's sort of two questions that I think about as I look at a leading biotech pharma organization like Lilly out there doing this sort of thing. Is would any of the other large pharma organizations, number one, add their data to TuneLab, and would there be benefit to doing that, or would they look at what you're doing with TuneLab as an example of what they can be doing? So I'm just curious what you see as it like in the landscape of large pharma, what you might expect to see.
I would be tremendously excited for any of our peers to be interested in participating. We have built TuneLab with a focus on our biotech ecosystem and those partners, but nothing would preclude any larger potential partners to participate. So we would certainly be open to that. Whether they will follow suit or not, of course, I am in no position to predict what their inner workings might look like. I again, I don't think that any of our peers have shown the signs of wanting to externalize their models. This has actually been a really exciting, but not a simple undertaking. And I'll certainly be curious to see how the broader industry reacts.
For sure. So, how do you and Nisha and Lily as a whole sort of evaluate the success of TuneLab? What would you hope to see from TuneLab over the next year in order or 5 years to determine whether it's accomplishing the goals of the organization?
Overall, I would say from Lily's vantage point, it's there's the sort of, quantitative element of how many biotechs have we helped advance, how many, how many successful drug candidates have entered the clinic as a result. Those are some of the metrics that we're actively thinking about and would be excited to collect and share back. But, I think making sure that we also continue to evolve the offering and actively, as Lilly, learn from collaborations such as the one we're building with In Citro, are also very concrete goals where we want to bring cutting edge models to all of TuneLab, and I would include Lilly in that as well.
As we sort of head toward the end of our time together and sort of zoom out a little bit, I'm interested in what TuneLab says about how the emergence of ML AI, changes the drug discovery and development process in the years to come.
I think we're really most excited about seeing the small molecule and the antibody programs advance at significantly faster rates, both in thinking about how many molecules need to be synthesized, how many experiments need to be run. And, as these in vivo models come online, the ability to really rapidly accelerate those programs is certainly something we're keeping a close eye on. Further looking further afield, as I mentioned briefly, we'll be also really interested to see what we can unlock across other modalities, and continue to expand the breadth in the offering.
Yeah, and as you were talking, one of the things that sort of occurred to me is that, as new data sets are added on here, there's sort of this opportunity for Lilly, but then also all of your participating organizations to sort of see the relationship between the data that gets introduced to these models and the quality of the results that come on. And so, there's a lot of talk about sort of scaling curves as it pertains to language models, but these alternative foundation models that you're creating will have scaling curves of their own. And so, there's this opportunity for all of these different organizations to sort of hitch a ride on the curve and see how the new data leads to even better outcomes for each of the organizations that participate.
That's exactly right. And I think as we start to see further advances in de novo design, really thinking about starting to be able to move from inferencing as a service to workflows as a service and really pushing into actually coupling de novo design with all of these property predictive models, you can imagine very rapidly getting from, okay, I've got an idea for a target to, wow, I've essentially got a molecule that I think will work in an animal before you've ever done anything in a lab is really exciting.
For sure. So, as you look toward the next few years, are there any other hurdles on the horizon for TuneLab that you think we'll know we're really starting to make it when we hurdle a particular type of challenge?
Oh, yeah, great question. At launch, we're still very humble. So I'm very focused on, making sure that we go from unknown to known, making sure that we go from, some skepticism around, oh, contribute what to, oh yeah, I know what that federated learning thing is, and I know it's safe. Those are the two biggest pieces that we're really going to be focusing on in the immediate term. Again, I mean, I think this collaboration with In Citro, I see this as a really exciting mandate for TuneLab to continue to push the envelope to figure out where cutting edge modeling can truly serve the ecosystem, how we can actually finally leverage the collective to create the right training set to make it possible. and just to continue to do a couple of those a year will really hopefully move the needle fast.
For sure. As we head toward the end, where should interested biotech organizations start if they want to explore, the way TuneLab works and how they can participate if they want to participate?
Yes, please come visit us. So we've got our website up, lilytunelab.com, and there's a contact us page where you can easily get in touch with our team, and we'd love to tell you more about it.
Well, Aliza, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. The model that TuneLab is establishing strikes me as one that the entire biotech, pharma, and healthcare ecosystem can learn from, because so many of the problems that we have and resolving issues that happen for people's health, which is a public issue at large, is getting all of the data needed to gain the complete visibility. So thank you so much for joining and sharing the work that you're doing at Lilly.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
And that's it for this episode of Data in Biotech. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, rate, or leave a review in your podcast platform of choice. See you next time.